I'm Dean Karras, founder and owner of Nosis Nursery here in Ramona, California.
Right on. So Dean, we had fun earlier today going to the safari park. That was epic.
Yeah.
It was great to finally get a chance for you, Julian, and I to all hang and to go on a little micro. It almost felt like we were in habitat, kind of.
Oh yeah.
One of the things that we've got coming up together is that we're both going to be participating in the PPA sale that's happening this month on the 30th.
Yep.
In Eagle Rock. So I thought it would be kind of cool to show people a little bit of an inside look at what you're doing here at Nosis. And I know you do all kinds of stuff, but one of the things that caught my curiosity, or piqued my curiosity anyway, was some of the stuff that you're doing with Trichocereus.
But that's the Jules giant, not to be confused with Jim's Jules, which is another nice clone, but not nearly as fat or spineless as the original OG Jules giant.
Gotcha. Okay.
That's spineless.
Yeah.
Like most of our politicians, you know what I'm talking about, baby? Hey, no big deal. Boom, boom.
This
I'll be
one's
here all
tough to
week.
throw in the ground. This is a.
Oh, is it variegated?
Yeah.
Oh shit!
That's an Atacamensis.
Oh, dude, that's sick, man.
And it showed it as a pretty tiny seedling. It's been there for years, so it's probably gonna stick.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah. Down there, basically every new type locality where there was a different dominant phenotype, they would consider a new species.
Right.
That's not how you do good taxonomy. So in the older cactus books, especially the ones that defer to the German taxonomists of yesteryear, you have maybe 70 or so different Trichocereus species. It should be about 30. But what's interesting is Joel Lode, based on some DNA analysis done by people slightly before him, groups, I think it's about 3 dozen species, give or take. And theoretically, Peruvianus, Pachynoe, and Macrogonus are all one very large and variable species, or species complex.
That makes sense.
And if we use priority, they would all be technically Macrogonus. So it'd be Macrogonus, subspecies Pachynoe, Macrogonus, subspecies Macrogonus, and Macrogonus, subspecies Peruvianus. That's weird to us because Macrogonus.
So Pachynoe is Pachynoe and Peruvianus synonymous with each other? I mean,
Technically, yeah.
okay.
Here's what further muddies the picture is humans have been moving around these cacti for probably the greater part of 4,000 years.
Right.
We know they propagate easily from clones, and we know that they were revered as sacred plant medicine in the past.
Right.
So it's highly likely that they were transported in the form of cuttings from one locality to another, and there's many Trichocereus species and genotypes all over the region. And so what would have happened is then you get new hybrids created with the ones that got brought in and the local populations. So there's a ton of genetic variation, and it's really tough to say, you know, where one species ends, where another one begins, and how much of it is the result of human intervention, especially kind of usually when we get invasive plants or introduced plants, or plants that, you know, move around with some kind of human interaction, they don't then hybridize with whatever was there and create new forms.
Right.
In this case, we can be almost certain that that's happened. Yeah, so they're the first cacti I ever started growing from seed, I think now, I did my first batch of seeds when I was 21, 33 now, so 12 years ago. So those would be the oldest ones I've grown from seed. Definitely a good genus to start from, or start with as a beginner. They're some of the easiest, fastest growing cacti, much more tolerant of not as well draining soil, richer soil, and I think I had also some beginner's luck. And I just kind of fell in love with the genus. And then especially moving to a colder climate here in Ramona, we'll get substantial frost. We're solidly like zone 9A, 9B.
Okay.
So a typical winter, I'll see dips down to about 25.
And for the folks that are watching this that maybe aren't as, you know, zone 9A, 9B, what does that mean exactly? Can you
It's how cold we get in the winter, so, and also how wet. So I'm 40 miles from the coast. We're at about 2,000 feet elevation, and we're also sitting, if you head up 45 minutes that way, you gain another 2,000 feet elevation, and so there's a lot of moisture that dumps too. So we have for being in Southern California, actually decent rainfall. Our historic average is 16. Most of coastal Southern California is going to be around 8, 10, 12 max.
Right.
And we also get cold out here. So there's a lot of columnar cacti in particular, especially blue ones like Pilosocereus. Must have gotten a publicist or something, because everyone's after especially the more obscure Pilosocereus species now. I love them too. I love blue cacti. I love columnar cacti.
Right.
A lot of them really can't hang with the cold. I have 2 of the more common like Pachyclatus clones in the ground, and they don't die, but they get really severe tip damage. So they're doing kind of weird sausagey growth, like you would expect on something that's supposed to do it, like Armatocereus, but they're not supposed to do it. So I think Trichocereus chose me. I definitely initially had a lot of interest in them ethnobotanically, since
Right.
they've been used as a sacred plant medicine for at least 4,000 years, probably a lot longer than that. And so there's definitely a mystique around them there for me. But they're beautiful cacti. They're fast-growing cacti. They're easy to grow for the most part. And there's just a lot of really, really cool forms. And like we were talking a little bit earlier about taxonomy. And,
So did you get
yeah.
started?
Go ahead.
Cut you off, but did you get started growing plants? Was your initial interest into plants Trichocereus?
And cannabis.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, 2 good plants.
Oh, exactly, exactly. And then from there, edibles.
Okay.
I haven't been doing tomatoes a lot lately. I've been a little too busy running the nursery.
Not cannabis edibles.
No, actually real tomatoes, like
Gotcha.
the ones.
Okay.
No, I'm not using that as code for cannabis. No, I mean, I'm big into edibles too. That was like the next thing that I really got into. And I think I was a hermit for a while. I was kind of just doing my own thing. So it's funny because I got into the kind of Trichocereus craze, I'll call it, really, really early on.
Right.
But then wasn't really well networked, wasn't on Facebook, wasn't in the community. So until opening the storefront, and there's actually a really big Trichocereus collector community down here, Southern California generally, but there's a lot of it here in San Diego specifically, and a lot of people doing cool things with the genetics and trying to get cool genetics out to the community, doing a lot of propagation. But yeah, I was kind of a hermit for a lot of years, just kind of doing my own thing, reading a lot online, reading a lot in books, sourcing seeds from as many obscure vendors as possible. A lot of the German vendors had interesting Trichocereus genetics, because again, it was a lot of the German taxonomists, turn of the century,
Right.
that were going down to South America and doing a lot of the first cactus observation and taxonomy in South America
Right.
at that moment, because North America had already been pretty well explored by early botanists. And and then after kind of seeing an explosion of interest in Trichocereus, kind of coinciding with my own growth in Trichocereus, it's been really, really contagious. It's cool. I've mostly gravitated towards what I would call like landrace strains as opposed to the hybrids. I think there's a lot of breeders out there doing amazing work with hybrids, and I'd like to actually be doing some of my own in the future. There's a few phenotypes I like selecting for, so I like really, really fat cacti, I like really blue cacti, and then spines, just depends. There's all kinds of spine features I like.
Right.
I like really bright red spines, yellow spines, long spine, there's all
Fat
kinds of different features.
spines.
Yeah, and so that's one of the...
Super short spines.
Exactly, there's all
Yeah,
kinds
I
of
mean,
things.
it's just-
Some of the shortest spines ones are really, really interesting. So you have things like a lot of the Pachynoid types have little to no spines, and then you have things like Scopulicula, where the spines are like almost invisible. Even
Right.
the areoles are tiny. And so yeah, there's just so much diversity out there, and then a lot of them will rapidly hybridize with each other, even if they're distinct species. And so a lot of the people call them like now mostly Trichocereus hybrids or Tricholobivia hybrids. You take a little bit of Lobivia genetics, since Lobivia, Echinopsis, and Trichocereus are all closely related. So like you had Chick doing all the Echinopsis hybrids, little globular Echinopsis types that would produce magnificent, large, really colorful flowers, open up for about a day or two max. And then maybe a later rebloom. But now we're realizing you can cross those in with actually Trichocereus genetics. So you can have something that looks like a Trichocereus prurianus and is a giant columnar cactus, but rather than being loaded with white blossoms, you can have it with, all kinds of like crazy multicolor, magenta, orange, yellow, pink, purple blossoms. And so that, I think people are just now catching on with there was a really interesting clone called Zelly, which is I don't know who the other parent is, but it's a Trichocereus scopulicula cross.
Okay.
So it's really short spined. It looks kind of like a Pachynoid. except when it blooms, it doesn't look like a pachynoid. If you took a black and white photo, it would look the same, but rather than being kind of the stark white flower, it's super multicolor, kind of gorgeous flowers.
Interesting.
On something that looks like a pachynoid.
That's interesting. And you know what? It actually makes perfect sense because you've got my buddy Alex. I don't know if you've had a chance to meet him, but he goes Cactus Update on Instagram.
Yeah, I've interacted with him a little bit.
He'll
online.
also be at PPA, by the way.
Okay, right on.
So definitely come out. But he's trying to cross Stenocactus with Thelocactus, which, I mean, I feel like it should definitely be possible because I have Ferrocactus, Stenocactus crosses that were done by a friend of mine in Arizona. So it's got it. I mean, the bodies look similar, but it looks exactly like a Stenocactus coptonogonus. Ferrocactus macrodiscus flower, more so.
Oh, okay.
And so,
do the spines look ferro, or do they look more like
No, it looks like it looks just like a coptonogus, coptonogus morphologically. So the body, everything else looks like that, but the flower looks more like macrodiscus. I mean, I digress, but the whole point is that there's all kinds of different cross species hybridization that's happening. So it should. I mean, it's no surprise that you could cross Libivia nechinopsis and Trichocereus.
Right.
It's like you wonder what else. Like, what don't we know? Like, what? Because you don't really get good fossils from cacti.
Absolutely.
You know? So it's like, what don't we know? What big chunks of info are missing? What things went extinct that didn't fossilize that we're not even aware of that would fill in some gaps for, like, just some of those taxonomic studies and things like that. Which, I mean, as a nurseryman and somebody who sells plants, a lot of the other people I know that sell plants are a little more resistant to some of the new information coming out of, like, DNA research and stuff like that. But, like, all of the curved spined mammillarias or hook spined mammillarias in Baja recently got switched into Cochima.
Oh, again, because they used to be called that, and then they got grouped into mammallar.
They got switched back. So DNA, I don't know.
The flowers are super morphologically distinct on the Cochimias.
Yeah. So I mean, but you look at, like, I think Diaweeka is one of them. But you look at Diaweeka, and it doesn't necessarily look like a Cochima flower.
Oh, interesting.
To me, anyway. I mean,
no, it looks like classic mammillaria flower.
Yeah.
Tetra and Sister Grammii that grows in Arizona that I grew up, seeing in the wild looks really similar. And if you saw them out of habitat, you might struggle to distinguish the two.
Yeah, and I noticed you have. It's like I saw your Diaweekas here, and I'm like, wow, they look so fat,
Oh, sure.
And so, like, they almost, like, it's Diaweeka, but it's like when I see them in habitat, they never look that cared for, They look so much more beat.
Well, I mean, we water too, I like things relatively hard grown, and one of the things, I'm limited on greenhouse space, so even with this shade cloth, most of my plants see quite a bit of UV radiation, and it creates a different plant. The farina in particular on plants is going to be different if you grow it in a greenhouse versus if you're growing it outside.
Yeah.
And then, hard grown means different things to different people, but how much water and fertilizer you give something will also determine how hard grown it is. But for me, I've always been had more plants I want to grow than I have space for. Even now, it's like I'm on a 4-acre property, but only so much of it's really usable. There's still, I'm catching up on my weed whacking. There's 4-foot high weeds in certain spots. Obviously, it's not a good place to just throw plants down that just get smothered by weeds. But so for me, hard growing has been a necessity. What I can control is, how frequently things get watered and fertilized. And even then, I try to keep things a little stingy because I want plants that a lot of what I grow, especially I grow a lot of things that are large and suitable for the landscape, a lot of the aloes, agaves, columnar cactus, just larger growing cactus, things like ferrocactus. They'll do fine in a show pot, but really they want to be in the ground, the yucca species. And so I want it so that when someone takes home a plant here, they don't need to worry about it frying if they're planting in the ground, even if they live, in Shelter Valley, which is basically Anza Borrego.
Right. That was one of the things that I was talking to both, the last couple of videos I've done were both with growers in Arizona who, for the most part, through the harshest UV times of the year, are growing under just shade cloth.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I have always enjoyed about getting plants from them is that I could take them home here, back to Los Angeles, and I could put them really basically, as long as I remember which direction they were facing, I can put them anywhere I want because they were started from seed outside, harsh climate, already getting used to the dryness and everything, and so versus something that was grown very rapidly in, you know, a peat moss heavy mix and was pushed with a bunch of fertilizers, and you take that out of the greenhouse, you try to, you know, people try to stick that in their backyard, and the thing just gets fried.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know? So yeah, I think there's something to be said for growing tougher plants.
Then, and I also test the waters a lot with how much cold, how much frost things can tolerate.
Yeah.
Especially a lot of the older cactus books, which are the only ones that have some of the more obscure species. A lot of them are just simply wrong. But you got to think a lot of them are written by people in Europe growing in glass houses. And so what they do is they have like propane heaters clicking on to keep ambient temps hovering at, let's say 34 or 36 or whatever the threshold they think is of their least hardy. But you know, I had Milo cactus sit out under a really tall shade structure all winter long and get rained on here as I'm dropping down to 25. They're fine, unscathed. And like a lot of other things like that, where I think what makes the difference is as long as you have warm sunny days punctuating the dips down into the colder temps at night. You can have frost on the ground in the morning, but as long as you have the sun burning off the frost and a lot of the plants aren't staying too cold for too long, you know, a lot of those specs on what's the lowest minimum temperature a certain cactus can handle, they're just plain wrong.
Well, I mean, I've noticed, dude. I mean, I've got friends who throughout the winter made efforts to keep their greenhouses at night no colder than like 60 degrees. You know, and I mean, I didn't do anything with mine. Mine was dipping down in some of the lowest points, dude. It was like, you know, just like 31 degrees, I think was my low. And I mean, I've got Pachypodiums in there. I've got Ubelmanias in there, and they were fine. Yeah. I mean, they were dry, but they were fine, you know, and I actually only had some things that were outside, and I mentioned that earlier, is I had a Pachypodium lameri, of all things, about 4 feet tall, and that got a little frost damage. So I'm hoping it'll bounce back, but I may have to chop it, and we'll see. But yeah, I mean, I think the plants can handle, depending on, it's like a boiling frog. You know, as long as it has time to acclimate up to whatever it's gonna have to endure, it can endure that.
Absolutely, and that's here too. There's some great, I mean, even like common landscaping plants like bougainvillea dies back in the frost here. Planted in November, expected to die in the winter. Plant it in April and get rooted in all warm season long, expected to, you know, it's gonna lose its leaves and be leafless for 4 months here in our climate, but expect it to wake up again. And so that's, especially with landscaping, I think makes the biggest difference. You know, your winter growers get them in right as the temperature's cooling off. So it'd be a lot of the aloes, some of the native plants, some of the mesums that are landscape worthy. If you're ever doing ice plant ground cover, almost all the ice plants are from winter rainfall areas of South Africa. Plant them in the fall. They don't like being planted in the spring and then having to endure summer without experiencing a cool season first. But yeah, anything that's borderline cold hardy. Another really good hack is morning sun, because again, morning sun's going to burn off any frost that settles on the plant. And use boulders strategically. Boulders are big thermal batteries, so they can actually prevent dips down as low as the plant otherwise would get.
Right. You strike me as somebody that's like deeply passionate about the plants. And one of the things that I always kind of look at that I guess that I find in the plants is I find sort of a meditative, oftentimes, for lack of a better word, I find myself in awe quite often with the plants, and it's something that has become quite a deep passion for me, and you strike me as somebody that shares that kind of passion. And I just wonder, like, how did that start for you? I mean, you mentioned cannabis, of course, but like, what was your journey and your foray as becoming a, you know, pretty well-versed nurseryman from what I can see? Yeah.
I don't know. I would say the path so I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, which is a really harsh climate. It's, you know, as a kid, it's not fun to be outside, I would say 8 months out of the year. You know, and the other thing too that makes it worse in some of those low desert areas like, you know, Las Vegas, Phoenix, Arizona, is they built so much concrete and asphalt, it's a giant heat island. So like, I'm used to, I grew up where you go out at midnight not just like this is a freak year, but in a normal year, there will be many nights where you go out at midnight and the temperature then is like 90 degrees. So imagine like baking at midnight, stepping outside. You feel the heat radiating off the concrete. So anyways, I don't know, it was miserable. Like I don't like the climate. I appreciate the beauty of the desert now.
Yeah.
No offense to anyone who lives in Phoenix, Arizona. It's otherwise a lovely place, gorgeous natural setting. So for me, it was moving out of that, since that's the only place I'd ever lived for the first 18 years of my life, then moving to the Bay Area to go to school. And just seeing a tremendous diversity of plants I'd never seen before.
Sure.
And then when it really clicked is I went to the UC Berkeley Botanical Garden, which is a fantastic botanical garden. Their old and new world succulent gardens are fairly small, but extensive in terms of the material and the quality of the material and their glasshouse collections. And I was taking a class on, it was my freshman year. I had to fulfill some science requirements. I was taking a class on dinosaur biology of all things, and learning about the concept of evolutionary convergence. And I had this light bulb moment when I was looking at, there's a gorgeous, it's gotta be pushing 20 feet now, Trichocereus trichocereus, and the UC Berkeley Botanical Garden. And I saw it growing up, having saguaros, surround me. And this part of my mind, this voice in my head saying, same but different, and how is this, and why is this? And that for me was a light bulb moment, because I wanted to understand why two organisms, they're both cacti, but that grow, thousands of miles away from each other, would end up reaching the same form.
Sure.
And so that's one of the things that inspires me about nature is without being too spiritual, esoteric about it, it's nature trying to find or seek form. And that's one thing that really fascinates me about, hybrids and humans tinkering with genes through successive lineages, is we can kind of see what forms nature is willing to take on and really push them to do that through cultivation techniques as well as through selective genetics. So so I don't know, ever since then, and then to me, I'm really interested in ethnobotany in a really wide sense of the word. So in a narrow sense of the word in our culture, that word has taken on kind of a connotation of like drug plants, and I do find that fascinating. I'm interested by traditional indigenous practices around shamanism and plant medicine. It's really not my calling and my path directly, but I like thinking about ethnobotany in a wider sense of the word. And so even if you think about like ethnobotany as a discipline that they teach at university, what they're really getting at is like food crops and fiber crops and timber crops.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking...
And I like studying the relationship between plants and humans in ornamental horticulture too, and really seeing that there's this dimension of ornamental horticulture that we could call ethnobotany. I think that cactus collecting is very much something that we could study ethnobotanically. Like what is it, like the question you just asked me, what is it that gets people into plants? And there is this thing that it's like people can share their own experience, but there's something about plants that just makes certain brains like go crazy and really just like get all in on it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't disagree with that at all. I mean, what came to mind is we were looking at the Coachal Myrtillo cactus, and people eat the berries, they make jam out of them, they do all kinds of stuff with them, and that's certainly an ethnobotanical use.
Absolutely, yeah.
It doesn't have to be using it for psychedelic purposes or whatever. There's all kinds of different things. Well, dude, I really appreciate you taking the time. I know you're a busy guy. You're running your own business. As a small business owner myself, I understand how valuable your time is. So thank you for setting the time aside to hang out with us and to show us around. And I can't wait to see you at the PPA event on the 30th, man. Yeah, thanks for inviting me. My pleasure. I had a blast today. Fuck yeah, dude. Hell yeah. All right, well, make sure you subscribe to the channel. If you liked what you saw today, hit that button, hit the notification bell so you can stay up to date in what I'm putting out. I'm going to be putting out a lot more content as we go forward into the rest of the year. Thank you for being here. Peace.